Hello YouTube, my guest today is Lynn Ruth Miller. Lynn came to the world of comedy in her 70s and is now the world's oldest working comedienne. You may have seen her on Britain's Got Talent, America's Got Talent, First Date. She's full of talent, she's full of stories. Lynn Ruth Miller, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Thanks for coming around my house to look at my computer.
It's absolutely beautiful. It's so tidy.
Oh, thank you.
I can't get over how tidy
You've got to tell
it
my
is.
girlfriend that, seriously.
Yeah, I just can't believe it.
She accuses me of not being tidy.
Yeah.
So
that's what this
maybe
one,
just
no.
yeah,
this
just
one
send her
guy
an
said
email.
Englishmen never like to divorce until they find another cleaner.
Really?
That's horrible. We have to find another cleaning lady, otherwise I'm sticking with her.
Oh my Lord!
But this one's a good one. You should keep this one.
It's
She's
a good
immaculate.
one.
Yeah.
No, it's me. I'm the immaculate. Yeah, trust me.
You're the one that washes
I'm
the
the
floors.
immaculate.
I don't believe it for a minute. All
right. So
So
now,
as the world turns,
this is the world spinning round.
I often say this when I finish my emails, and so the world turns. God,
That's really beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah.
So where did you grow up? Isn't Ohio, right?
I grew up in Ohio. I was born in Toledo, Ohio. You actually had the hospital. You were looking at this Mercy Hospital.
So it's on this street, right?
It was on this street, and
we
I'm
think
guessing
it's one of these, don't we?
because we had a sunroom, and that's why.
Be careful of that because it picks up.
It seemed to me that we had a sunroom, so it seems like that it was a duplex. We lived downstairs. It was not very fancy, but I walked to Fulton School, and I lived across the street from the landlady, Mrs. Berlin, and I loved it's really gone downhill this neighborhood. But I lived across the street, and it would be across Islington, across Fulton, from the landlord. And her name was Mrs. Berlin, and she wore a hearing aid, and the battery to the hearing aid they wore it around their chest. And when I would go in, Mrs. Berlin would be listening to the telephone with the receiver, because we had receivers then, on her chest. And I would come home to my mother, and I would say, when Mrs. Berlin talks, she talks to me from her heart. Why don't you talk to me from your heart? Why do you yell at me all the time?
But were you saying that to be funny, or you knew?
No, I wasn't being funny.
Yeah.
My mother never always screamed at me, and Mrs. Berlin loved me. And Mrs. Berlin would hug me, and I would rest my hand on her little machine. Yeah. And she would hear I would hear her little heartbeat. I loved it. And she would give me cookies and milk.
Oh,
she loved me.
That's so nice.
All the neighbors loved me. Down the street from me was my second grade teacher.
Down this way?
It was away from Fulton Street. Yeah, and I would walk down here. My second grade teacher was Mrs. Weir, and I loved her, and I used to go in there, and she used to give me cookies and milk. And then if you went farther down, it was my friend Carol Reinstein, who was absolutely exquisite. Her mother wanted her to be on stage, and she dyed her hair blonde. You have to realize that we were all dark little Romanian and Polish Jews. And I would go up, and I would go to Carol Reinstein's house, and I'd say to my mother, "Can I please play with Carol Reinstein?" And my mother would say, "All right." And I would go down to the street, and I would knock on the door, and Carol Reinstein, who was about 1 inch tall, would open the door, and she'd say, "Put out your hands." And I put out my hands, and she'd smack them, and I'd start to cry and come home again. And so one day, I think, who was it? Somebody said to me, why don't you smack her back? And I said, well, I just never thought of that. It just didn't occur to me. That's what I did. I went to Carol Reinstein because I thought she was so beautiful. It turned out that she was a psychological mess. I was fine. And what's this? This is Central Cathedral. We were, it was a Catholic community. And I interviewed the priest, but he wouldn't have been the priest. He was the big deal. He was the one in charge. And I interviewed him with the rabbi and with the Protestant minister for.
What did you interview him?
Because
for?
I was a journalist, and I interviewed him for Valentine's Day about what is love. This was the kind of crazy ideas I would have. And I remember I said to him, and he was Irish, and I said, "So what is love?" And he said, "Oh, God love you." I said, "Just God love you." I said, no. What's love? What is it? Oh, God loves you. He just loves you and loves you and loves you. And the rabbi, I said, what's love? He said, I don't know, but I have such a terrible stomach. I remember that. I thought Jewish
That
cooking.
almost sounds like a
Jewish cooking.
joke.
It does such a terrible stomach. I said, well, maybe that's because you care so much, Rabbi Goldberg. That's maybe what you care so much. And I love that. And then down the street was from Catholic, the Catholic thing that's Collingwood was Scott High School, and Scott High School was where I went to high school. I was on Collingwood, but I can't. It was not that far, but I don't know. I mean, it's changed. So look at it. Toledo was a pit. John Denver sings about it. He says, Saturday night in Toledo, Ohio, I spent a month there one night, sitting in the bakery watching the buns rise. Absolutely awful place. But it's gotten better. That's Scott High School. You just went by it. There it is. Yeah, that's Scott High School.
That's where you went to school?
That's where I went to school.
And what was it like? What were you like at school? Good student?
We had oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah. We had schooling, they call it, they have a name for it, where I just went through, there must have been 1,500 children in the freshman class, but I went through school with 40 people. We were the college prep people, and I went to school with all of them. There were 40. We were the ones that wrote for the paper, and we were in the shows, and it had a big black community. I remember there was a kid that was the head of the football team named Clark Cottrell, and what I remember is I was just very shy. I wasn't shy. I was frightened. There was nothing shy about me. I've always been very verbal, but very frightened. And I think, shy in a way. I didn't want to say what I thought. I was always afraid to be wrong, because at home it was always wrong. So in order to get our paper and our supplies, we had to go to the school store, and we had to go through this really rough black area where they were tossing each other around, and I was a small little girl, and I was just like this. And I remember, and then we had to have swimming. You couldn't graduate from school in America unless you can pass swimming, and I'm terrified.
Really? I can't swim.
I
can't
either.
Have graduated school.
Oh no, you have to be clever
Why
I was.
Why do you need to swim?
I don't know, because I was terrified of the water, absolutely terrified. So I thought about it. I was 14. I thought about it, and I thought, I've got to get out of this. And so what I did is I got my great idea, and I went up to, and I remember the teacher was like 6 feet tall, and at my tallest, I was 5'1", so I was really little. And I looked up at her. I said, well, I can't go swimming today. And she said, why? And I said, well, because I'm having my period. And in those days, we didn't have tampons.
I thought of that.
No, you wouldn't work with you. So in those days, we had tampons, but I was afraid of wearing tampons. And the reason I was afraid of wearing tampons is because Wanda Pickett said she lost her virginity that way. And I've always said that's probably why I can't swim. But anyway, so I said to her, I said, no. I said, and she said, okay. And I went upstairs and on the balcony and watched all the other people swimming. And I read Gone with the Wind or whatever I was reading, my book, but I was always reading. And then I kept telling her this. We had it 3 times a week. And into the 3rd week, I said, no, I still have my period. She said, have you seen a doctor? And I said, yeah, he thinks something ruptured. And I ended up, I don't know how I got away with this. I really don't know how I got away with it. My mother didn't write a note or anything. She said, oh, my God. I think she must have had some kind of terrible problem with menstruation as well. So I ended up taking volleyball with all the pregnant 14-year-olds who were all black. And I wanted a baby. I think I told you this. I wanted a baby more than anything in the world. And they were all pregnant. So I remember looking at one of them. And, even though I got an A in biology, I really didn't get how you did it. I thought, no. That way.
You were really totally naive about it.
So I said to this pregnant girl, we're playing volleyball, and I'm never hitting. I'm so uncoordinated. I said to her, pointed to the tummy. I said, oh, how did you do that? And they looked at this little white girl.
And
what does she know?
How old were you at this time?
I was 14.
And you didn't have a clue.
I didn't have a clue. I kept saying, no, it couldn't be like it said there. I mean, I know. Just couldn't. Doesn't work that way. I always thought babies came out of your belly button. That's what I thought. But I wonder, how did you do that? Really? And this is till I was like 19.
Yeah.
And this is what
so you didn't date anyone till you were 19?
Oh, I did. But what we did... when I think of it, after seeing Touch at Soho, I think, God, this is just so antique. You went out. You always had a chaperone. But we drove. And you had a chaperone. And
who would that chaperone be?
well, when you drove, you just drove with the. As soon as you were 16, you went out with someone. Like when I was 14, I would have a date with someone. Who was I dating then? I was dating Buddy Glazer. I wasn't dating Roy Davis then. I was dating a lot of interesting, horrible people. Oh, what was his name? I can still remember. It begins with H. He was a little short guy. Anyway, all the short guys always took me out because they were taller than I was. You know, they loved it. I'm a man because she's way down there, and you would go, and the 16-year-old would drive, and then when you went to the dance, there was a chaperone, and you held hands on the first date, and then they kissed you on the third date, but they didn't kiss you not like you call kissing. It was just very dry dry little kiss, but it was on the lips, and then they call you did, you know, and then you would come in and you say, "Why am I tingling in such a strange place? Why?" And then they would call you every day, and you would sit on the phone and talk to them. And there was a guy there. We had bright people in that school. In my 40, we had a Japanese girl that I had never realized that their parents evacuated her from California because they had put her parents in one of those camps during the war. Her name was Hotemi Takeshita, and she was.
How old were you then when the war was
14.
happening?
Well, the war happened when I was 8.
Yeah.
Because I remember my sister had just been born, and we heard it on the radio. We didn't have television. And we heard on December 7th, 1942, America has been maliciously attacked at Pearl Harbor, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And we all loved Delano Roosevelt. And we really loved Delano Roosevelt because we knew what Franklin was doing with his secretary. He was banging her every day. And we just loved Delano Roosevelt, who was the homeliest woman you've ever met in your life, but very wise. And we loved Delano Roosevelt. And then Wendell Willkie was running for president. So my parents must have been conservative because I had a little Willkie button on some of the...
This is a very conservative area, right?
Oh,
then
but
and now.
Daddy, but Jews always voted for Franklin Delano Roosevelt because he got them out of the Depression, and my parents suffered a great deal. My mother told me that there were years where all she had were... This is how she'd get me to cry. All we had were potatoes, she said, and then on Friday, that's the Jewish Sabbath, my mother would find a lemon to make them taste better, and I'd go, oh. So I loved my grandma. God, I love my grandma. And she said my grandma never sat down to eat. Yeah, this is what we had. Never sat down to eat. She finished what was in the pot. I couldn't stand it.
So she laying that guilt.
Oh, she was laying it on me like, man.
Was that always in the background, that kind of...
Oh, she never forgot it.
Poverty of the past?
Yeah, the poverty of the past, she never forgot it. That's why
and
she married my father.
What about your family? What did your parents do?
Daddy was a millionaire. We had just tons of money, but I didn't know it. I didn't know it. I never had a new dress until I was 13, and I will never forget that new dress. We got 3 of them.
And how did he make his money, your dad?
Daddy, I like to think it was just from accounting. Although my Uncle Jack made all his money with black market tires. And my Uncle Harry was arrested for dope peddling.
Oh, really?
Hell of a family. Yeah, my Uncle Harry was arrested for selling dope. And he was put in the federal penitentiary in Ypsilanti. And when I would drive home from the University of Michigan to Toledo, I would always yell, "Hi, Uncle Harry!" And everybody was so embarrassed they would hide in the... I loved my Uncle Harry. I wrote him letters. In those days, you couldn't write letters to an inmate in a federal pen unless you got permission. And I never realized what he had done. It was just amazing to me. His wife, the rabbi, and me. And that's who wrote him. And I wrote him letters. And he loved me like some people love God. And when my husband left me, and it was very nonverbal. He didn't say anything. But when my husband left me, and I was living in this beautiful, beautiful flat, and I couldn't afford to pay the rent when my husband left me, and my Uncle Harry came and sat with me to sell all the furniture. Never said a word, but he gave up work, he gave up everything to sit with me and just help me sell my furniture. Because he loved me that much, and I was the only one. Never wrote me back. He wasn't allowed to. He was only allowed, I think, 3 letters a week. One was to his lawyer or something. That would have been the other one. And he got out. He was pardoned. but my aunt never forgave him. She said, well, he must have done something. And he probably did, knowing my Uncle Harry. And my Uncle Harry, well, they lived in a drugstore, and at those times, pharmacies had a lot of toys and everything. And they had, after they had my cousin Jessica, they kept trying to have babies. Of course, I had no idea what they were doing to try to have babies. I thought they were shopping to have babies. I didn't know. But they finally got my cousins Ricky and Penny, one right after the other. So they were having a very successful time there. And he used to bring them gifts because they were like magic children. They didn't think they'd ever have them. And one day, my cousin Ricky said to him, he came home and he was tired and he didn't bring him a gift. He said, where's my present? And he said, my Uncle Larry said, I didn't bring you one. He said, well, then go to hell. And the kid was something like 5. And this is the kid that I told you about. We lived in this Catholic community in 40 Burkhead Place.
Do you want to look at that?
Yeah, and he said Halloween. Yeah, there. And we lived, there were houses of nuns.
So this is like a gated community,
Yeah,
right?
but it's not like now. I mean, like, look at those signs. They weren't there.
But is this still in Ohio?
This is where I went to Scott High School. I walked from there. Yeah, that's where it was. I lived at 40 Burger Place. I went, you can see
It's
it.
around here, right?
Yeah, but when you go back to the
We
gate.
can't actually get inside, so we have to look.
That's because it's
over
a
the
gated
fence.
community.
Yeah. They won't let Google in.
Yeah, anyway, and we would go over to we had houses of nuns around this park. And my cousin Ricky, the same one that said, Father, go to hell, he said, I love Halloween. He said, because I want to go Halloweening and I want to go trick-or-treating at the sister's house and scare them out of their habits. That was before they were allowed to wear, yeah. And
So
the
it's
other
like one
thing,
of these, right?
it's one of these,
Yeah.
and
you used to climb over this fence, didn't you?
I climb over the fence to see my Aunt Hazel, because I love my Aunt Hazel.
And how does it feel looking at it now? Because you love that place, right?
Oh, I loved it. No, how does it feel? It feels like, God, I never appreciated my childhood because I was so afraid of my mother. It was a white house. This is a brick house. Ours was stucco.
Let's see if we can find it.
It's there. No, it isn't. Oh, you're down at the corner.
No.
We were down the other way down. No, not
The other
that
way.
Yeah,
This
way down.
nearer the gate.
Much nearer the gate.
And what was
My Aunt Tick, the one that the husband was in prison, my Aunt Tick and Uncle Harry, they lived in Burkhead Place too, but it was a stucco house. It wasn't brick,
No.
and it had a big back porch, and we had a big cherry tree, and we used to do entertainments. I'd make lemonade, and then I'd go into my mother's house, and my mother's closet, and I would get all her old clothes because my mother gave away clothes when nobody.
So was your mum quite glamorous?
My mother was
right?
glamorous, but she was a bitch.
She was a bitch.
And she wasn't glamorous the way you think. She wasn't educated. Like I used to say to her, Mama, I'm going to take her to the art museum and show you they have Van Gogh. And my mama would say to me, that crazy painter, I wouldn't put his crap on my walls. I said, you can't afford his crap
what
on
did
your
she
walls.
like then if she didn't like Van Gogh?
She liked soap
Van Gogh.
operas.
Soap
She-
operas.
soap
Soap
operas.
Soap operas and nice dresses.
And beautiful clothes.
Okay.
And food. We were all addicted to food. I really believe that's why I was anorexic, because I could use food as a weapon to fight her, because she was an unhappy woman. And I wrote a book, Starving Hearts. You can get it on Amazon, and
About
you can get it.
anorexia, right?
It's all about that first
And
marriage.
how did all that start? That started when you were married to your first husband. Right?
That's what I've always said that, but when I look back, I think it started when I was 16 or 17, and I realized I could use.
I guess the seed gets planted.
Yeah, I could use food as a weapon against her, because she cooked these
Against your mum.
Oh, she cooked these elaborate meals. My favorite story is just elaborate. And my father had ulcers. He could, now he would have been cured. They have antibiotics, and he would have been cured. He had a duodenal ulcer, and they had to cut his stomach. I remember when he had his surgery. But anyhow, so mother would cook a gigantic meal. But like, you can't imagine. You see a restaurant buffet, that's nothing compared to what my mother made for dinner, okay? And we ate at 6. And we didn't eat at 6:01, we ate at 6. And my father had ulcers. I never saw him except he was standing and holding his tummy. My sister was so obese, we couldn't, fat, we couldn't cram her into ready-made dresses. She had to have special dresses. She was a big fat.
So she had like the opposite relationship to food that you.
Oh, but hers, she maintained. I said to her, my God, Marcia, I eat twice as much as you at a meal. And she said, yeah, but I eat continually. She had that fat operation when she was in her 70s, I think. She's 8 years younger. She had that fat operation where they cut your stomach.
And they suck it out.
Yeah.
Liposuction.
No,
Well, the staple.
Staples,
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
She had that, always fat. Well, anyhow, so you have the father with ulcers, mother always on a diet because she was 4'11", and she swore that if she ate so much as a brownie, she couldn't get into one of her expensive designer dresses. And that left me. And she would cook all the. So one day she cooked the typical 6 o'clock dinner, which was enough for a restaurant and a half. Could have fed the Armenian army. I mean, sorry.
But do you think that's because she grew up poor, though? She
had nothing to eat.
She was overcompensating, right?
Yeah. So my uncle came over. My Uncle High was another one. My Uncle High had a baby in every state. The first of the month, my father would sit down and write checks to all the mothers of my Uncle High's babies. Yeah. That's my family. Anyway, my Uncle High came over with 6 of his friends who were probably out. They were studs. They were out. Anyway, 6 o'clock before they went to the houses to find the prostitutes they were going to ram. Anyway, and my mother, as all Jewish women, anyone that's Jewish will nod at this. My mother said, "Stay for dinner." Always. They always would stay for dinner. And then she turned to me and she said, "I don't have a thing in the house. I know better." My uncle said to her, he said, "Listen, Ida," he said, "there are 4 of us. That's 5 men. You don't have enough food." And I said to my uncle, So we went in there, and I'm telling you, she carted out one thing after another. We had leftovers I still can't believe it. And then nobody could move. And then, of course, when she brought all the dishes in, because they couldn't eat everything, she turned to me, tears in her eyes. They didn't eat anything. They didn't eat a thing. It's God on heaven.
It sounds like to me your mum maybe had a lot to do with
the eating disorder. No,
yeah.
The eating disorder was a sense of, when I think about it now, first place, nobody knew what it was. Nobody knew what I was doing.
Should we go and look at the house where you were living with your...
I was living with my eating disorder was 40 Burkett Place. Then 73 Dana.
Yeah.
That was after I got married. But it was a sense of inadequacy.
This one, yeah? Or this street?
It's 73 Dana.
So who was the guy...
Tommy.
You married? Who was this guy?
Tommy... It's All in Starving Hearts, which is the book you can get on Amazon, and now you can get it in Kindle.
I'll
Tommy,
put a link to that in the video.
Please, because it's my bestseller. That's a story in itself for all would-be authors.
So what was happening in your life when you were living here?
When I was at the University of Michigan, so I think we should go to the University of Michigan.
You want to go there, yeah?
University of Michigan changed my life because I came from this... Is that how it is in the beginning? It's a marvelous place in Ann Arbor, and I didn't know it, but it's the Berkeley of the Midwest. It's very avant-garde, so of course they all knew where the babies came from. I still didn't figure it out. I had no idea still.
I don't believe you.
No, really, I didn't.
As naive.
Yeah, I was.
What, at the age of what, 18?
At 19. I read... I was 20. I read Sun Also Rises. I don't really know anything about Sun Also Rises by Hemingway, but he's got his situation is shot off in the war, so they obviously can't have sex. And his situation. Yeah. And they're all... I mean, this is, you don't know who's going to be watching this thing. So anyway, and this is a big subject in the book, and they go off in a hotel together. And, of course, he can't accomplish anything. But I couldn't figure out why it was so terrible for them to share a room. Why was everybody getting so excited about that? This is the classic question to my teacher who didn't know how to answer. So what's going to happen? Right?
Well, when they go in the room.
They go in the room, and he's obviously going to, one of them is going to use their hand, because obviously he didn't have a dick, so that's what he got.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Didn't know. I loved, he wrote A Farewell to Arms, where they snuggle up in a sleeping bag. No, I thought, that cozy. I love that. I hope he had a beard or something. I like furry men. I mean, no, I really was innocent. This is 20.
Yeah.
I found out.
So you must have met guys at university, though, no?
Oh, yeah, but we did a lot of groping.
Very innocent. Okay.
Oh, no, we did a lot of groping. I figured out anatomy there. But anyway, it was a sense of inadequacy. And whenever, I had something to do with my mother, I'm sure, but whenever I felt, it was not the style then for little girls to be smart. And I was very smart. I did very well in school. Okay. But people who do well in school are not necessarily smart. They're good at conformity. Always remember that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, always remember that.
So you think that was like a desire to please as well, to go, look, I can do
an
this.
Immense desire to please.
You always had your hand up? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
No?
I did well on tests. No,
Right.
I was afraid if I said it would be wrong.
Okay.
So the higher
See,
my
because
grades
now
were.
to me you seem someone who's not like that at all.
No.
You're definitely not afraid of conformity now.
No. I mean, I started stripping when I was 73.
Well, why
No,
not?
why not? That's
Yeah.
exactly why not. I but I lead a conservative life. And people always say, "Ah, you're just a little slut." No, I'm not.
And
I live
what does that mean to you, living a conservative life?
well. I'm very tidy about myself.
All right.
I live alone. I'll invite you over for dinner. That's about as far as you're going to get. And of course, now that I've had the cystoscopy, they've been up there 6 times. So I'm figuring, well, now I'm all stretched out. I'll have to date a black man. But anyway, at that point,
Doesn't it seem funny? Because your humor is quite dirty, right?
my
I've seen
humor
you
always
act.
has been dirty, but my life
And
isn't.
that's hilarious.
Yeah, it's you say dirty. It's dirty because it's coming from me.
Yeah.
If a younger person were saying that, they'd say, "Yeah, probably good with a
That's
black
an
man."
interesting juxtaposition because here you were saying how you were so naive and now.
But I am still.
Yeah. Okay.
I haven't. Well, we've been through this. I'm very. But when I felt inadequate and when I felt, I mean, men would be. I'm surrounded by men. I remember when I was doing my show with Sarah Louise Young, and it was Not Dead Yet. And she was saying, "So how many men have been in your life?" I said, "Oh, no men." And then we started one after another. I'm very much with men, but I was always the one they came to help them study for exams, or the one they told their troubles to. There was a guy named Dickie Klein who was now a dentist and would die if he heard me called Dickie Klein. I absolutely adored him. He was my cousin.
What's he now? Richard.
Oh,
Dr. Richard Klein.
That's right, Dr. Richard Klein, DDS, in Toledo, Ohio. And he married Muggsy. That's her name, Muggsy. And when I was at the University of Michigan, he had just broken up with with my cousin Sandy, who was a beautiful blonde, whose hand-me-downs I wore for the first 13 years of my life because my mother said I wasn't worth getting a new dress. If I was 13.
Really?
Yeah. So I wore them, and she's blonde and cute, and I was sort of dark and funny, with orthopedic Oxfords and braces and bad breath. But anyway, Dickie, when I went to the University of Michigan, Sandy had just dumped him, and he used to call me. This is a beautiful story. He would call me every night, and we would talk. And one time there were mixers that used to go to meet men, and I would say, "Oh, I don't want to go. I don't want to go because everyone's going to look at me." And he said, "What makes you think that what makes you so self-centered?" And I said, "Oh, no, I'm not self-centered." He said, "Yes, you are. Those people aren't looking at you. Oh, they're worried about what you think of them." And after that, whenever I would go in anywhere, and I still do it, if I would see somebody in a pretty dress or I would see somebody I would always tell them, I would always compliment them. And then when he graduated, which was the year after me, his brother Tommy came to Michigan, was a freshman, and he told Tommy to call me every night. So they call me every night, the Klein family. I loved him. I loved him so much, and I loved him in a very platonic way. And then when my husband and I divorced, the night that it all ended, we were playing bridge with Dickie, who is now 84. Oh, I'm 84. He's 85 or 86. And Muggsy, who is now something like 82. And we were playing bridge. And Tommy got angry at me and threw a glass of ice at me. They hit me on the head. And I remember, and they said, "Well, I think it's time to leave." and Tommy, and then that was the divorce. Then Tommy left. We slept in separate rooms. But I found out where babies came from pretty fast after I married him.
But you never had kids?
No, I wanted them. I wanted them. That's what actually triggered the anorexia. I always had eating problems. My mother said that, you eat funny. Because, but then at that time I wanted to have a baby, and I was not doing too well. I was not menstruating, although I had told the teacher in swimming that I was menstruating every day for 5 weeks, but I wasn't.
Because of your eating problems? Or?
I'm not sure, because it wasn't that bad yet. It didn't really happen, but what happened is they gave me estrogen, and at that time the estrogen wasn't as refined as it is now. And so when you have estrogen, you swell. And I still have, it's called idiopathic edema. I still have legs. When I get up, they're going to look at my legs. You'll see I've swollen ankles. I always do. They're better now, but they get better and worse. But So that means that you retain water. And when you retain water, you gain weight. And all of a sudden, I had heard my mother dieting for all my life, and I always said, I'm not going to be like her. I'm not going to sit there and eat a grapefruit while everybody is eating that good food. I'm not going to do it. And then I got on the scale. Well, it all started, this started right before I married Tommy. I was going to a Valentine dance, and I went to get a new dress. And I walked over to the size, and the sizes are different now, but I walked over to the size 6 because I was tiny and I couldn't get the thing on. And I finally got into a size 12, and I came home and I said, that's it. I'm not going to be my mother. I'm not eating a thing, which is the beginning of the anorexia. I'm not, because I found out, oh, I can last a long time without eating a thing. But even though I wasn't eating anything, I was taking this estrogen and I was swelling up. So I would get on the scale, not eating anything. I used to go to bed after I was a teacher, and I would come home after school and I would just go to sleep because I was so hungry. And I'd get on the scale, and I had gained 5 pounds because I would drink a lot of water, and smoke. I smoked cigarettes, a lot of cigarettes. So that began it. And I thought, well, I'm not like other people. And now when I read, other anorexics think they're not like other people either. So I thought, oh, I'm not like other people. I don't eat and I gain weight. I look at a chocolate cupcake and it's 10 pounds. And right about then was when Tommy came home from Korea, and I had sent him a Valentine, and he wrote me a letter and said, I'd like to meet you in Cleveland. Would you meet me at the Cleveland airport? That's what I was teaching. I was teaching in Shaker Heights, if you can find Shaker Heights.
Shaker Heights.
Shaker Heights.
How do you spell it?
Shaker Heights. I was living on Ashby. Yeah, it's very posh. And I was rooming with this roommate, and I used to come home and she'd be having sex on the floor.
Where do you want to look at?
I lived on Ashby. It was right near the shopping center.
Ashby.
Ashby.
How do you spell it?
Ashby.
It's Ashby like that.
And that was after I graduated.
Yeah.
And I'd come home and Ruthie was having sex on the floor, and I didn't even know what sex was, and I would just climb over her. I mean, I knew they were doing something, and I would climb over her and go to bed. But anyway, and I kept Ashby. It's Ashby Boulevard, and it was across from the shopping center. Very, very posh.
Oops.
And
so that's Ashby Road.
As near Van Aken. It was very near Van Aken because I drove down Van Aken to Cleveland Heights to the school.
So like around here maybe?
Yes, very close, right in there. And very posh, very, and Ruthie was, and I would weigh myself, starving myself, so that, and I kept gaining weight, so I kept eating less and less. And then I met Tommy. And then I picked him up at the airport, and he proposed. And in those days, if you weren't married by the time you were 22, you were an old maid. And I was 22. So we got married the next September, and I went to 73 Dana Street, which is where and then we continued with the estrogen, which is interesting because we certainly didn't want babies then. He was a student at Harvard Business School, and I had to pay part of his tuition. I put him through Harvard Business School, the GI Bill and I. He's still alive, Tommy. He lives in Colorado somewhere, but I have never talked to him since the day. Well, I did. I talked to him once after he left.
So how does it feel looking at it now, looking at the street? Because it sounds like this was quite an unhappy time, right?
Terrible. Just terrible. At the end of Dana Street was the great A&P shopping. It should have been there. There was a grocery store. It's not there now. I remember how hard I tried to make that marriage work. Just how hard I tried and how dismally I failed. And the more I failed, the less I ate. And I didn't know. Nobody knew what eating disorders were. And I remember going to this doctor and saying to him, I don't know what's wrong, because I also had bulimia. So I would have eating binges where I would eat like you can't imagine. I never ate trash from the trash thing, but I would have, I think. I think if I had thought of it, I would have. You eat for the same reason people drink until you get like a click and the world doesn't exist anymore. And that's what I would do. And then, of course, I would punish myself by not eating for weeks. And I was a very good cook. I would cook very gourmet meals. And I remember that Tommy we just didn't connect. We had a lot of sex. I figured it all out. But we didn't connect. And I thought, well, this is my husband. This is my life. And then when he graduated, one of the interesting stories, which would never happen today, is I was a writer. Remember, I was a writer. So I wrote for the Harvard News, which is the Harvard Business School newspaper. I wrote funny columns. So evidently, I always had a sense of humor. I always had a quirky way of looking at things. And one day, this guy stopped Tommy and he said, "Is Lynn Trieger?" That's the name. "Lynn Trieger, your wife?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "I just read her column. It was really good." And Tommy came home. This is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Tommy came home and said to me, "You'll never write." I just met this guy, and he said, "You'll never write again." I said, "Okay."
Because someone had complimented your work to him.
Instead of knowing who he was, he said, "You're Lynn Trieger's husband." Instead of,
my Lord.
never. I said, "Okay." I
And
was
he
going to
just
make
couldn't
it.
handle it.
He couldn't. I wanted
So it
to
sounds
make,
like he was quite an insecure person then.
He was horrible. He was horrible. He smacked me. He hit me
Really?
at a lot. And I thought I deserved it. That's what you do in the 50s. And at the end, yeah, he hit me because he never hit me. He never came home and said, "Yeah, I'm going to get her." It wasn't like that. We'd have a fight and he'd smack me.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'd duck.
And do you think that came from his insecurities? Because
Right. He was discharged from Korea. They never gave them R&R then. So I think that was part of the problem. He came back a
so he
year
came
later.
out of a war zone and then back
Into my war zone.
Oh my
And then
God.
when after we were divorced, and I had finally emancipated myself from my mother, and I lived, I think I told you this, 2166 Alvin. And he walked in with a sleeping bag and on his back, and he said, "Let's try again. I've been to a psychiatrist. It was all my fault." And I said no. I
Like
said,
he was just fixed like that.
yeah, it was fixed. And I said, no. I said, it was both our faults. And it really was. It was. Living with me must have been awful. I was nuts. I probably still am, but it's more control. But anyway, I said no. And I said, we'll be together. And of course, I was dying for sex. I liked sex. So I said, well, we'll be together in the first month. It'll be great. We'll probably never get out of bed. It'll be great. And then I'll start doing all the things that annoy you, and you'll start doing all the things that annoy me, and then you'll start hitting me, and I don't want to go home. And he did.
And that was wise
my father,
of you to see that.
I was a wise little girl all the time. That's one thing I've had. I've never felt young. Never felt young. I always understood about my mother. I never liked her because I was her victim, but I always understood. I was always wise. I saw life. I saw the bigger picture, which is interesting because I certainly have done some crazy crap in my life, and I'm not sorry. I've loved it.
What's some of that crazy stuff you've done?
Well, when I moved to Oklahoma City, I was fired because, of course, I had beautiful ideas. I was writing for 2 magazines and a newspaper, and I was being paid slave wages, and I was living in Midwest City, and then I was evicted because the landlady's brother was coming into this house. And by that time when I lived in Midwest City, I brought my pets. After I got out of the hospital, I was in the hospital. I had a cat named Michael and a dog named David that were, I believe they made me well because I had to get up and I had to take care of these animals. And then I had a poodle named Cindy, and I just adored them. And I threw them all in my Pontiac station wagon from Toledo, and I drove to Oklahoma City. And I moved to Midwest City, and then 6 months after I got there, David ran away. I never neutered him. I can't believe it. There was a railway track in the back, and I think he got killed. And he was the reason that I got well. It took me 10 years. And walking him, I've always thought, made him well. He was the only dog in captivity that looked both ways when you cross the street. I'd say, "Okay, David," you look both ways.
So
he died.
Him dying helped you get over your eating problems.
Then Michael died. And I had nothing. And then I found a little mutt named Cindy, and I had my cat named Eileen, and I was evicted. So but this time it was getting so rough in Oklahoma City because I didn't like Oklahoma City anyway. The stockyards are in the center of the city. When you open up the windows and the wind is blowing all the time, all you smell is cow shit. And I thought, no, I don't like this. So I moved to Bethany. I found a place for my animals and me. And by that time I'd found Molly. So I had Molly
If we
and
go
Cindy.
down here, Bethany.
Bethany. Very Nazarene community. Very Nazarene community. It's beautiful. And I moved there, and then
I don't know if we got that on there, you know.
Bethany. It's a beautiful
Brighton
community.
Road, what's that?
No,
that's
Brighton
later
Road.
on.
Oh, that was.
What happened to the trailer, actually? Did we speak about
Well,
that?
the trailer was. Yeah, I lived in a trailer court. And what happened is I drove the fifth wheel out.
I don't know if it's on
out to Redwood City. Get to Redwood City.
All right.
And
what address shall I put in?
Redwood City, and it's
Redwood
Glendale, 3021
City.
Glendale.
3021.
Glendale. And it's a little teeny house. And what happened is when I got to Redwood City, that's it, 3021 Glendale, little teeny house.
Remember, be careful of the table.
Oh, the table! I keep hitting the
sorry.
table. So when I got to Redwood City, I stayed in a mobile home park. You know, I had the trailer. I have a 24-foot trailer. I'm dragging around.
Here, yeah.
There's a little teeny house on the corner. It's white. It's little teeny. It's down at the end. There.
This one.
Yeah, little. Yeah.
That must be it.
I think it was the next one. It's little. Yeah, because it's a mess. Next to it was a whorehouse. Oh, next to it was the Hells Angels, and across the street was and then behind me was a whorehouse.
Really?
Yeah. That's where I was living.
Nice
Glendale.
neighbours.
No different than Wimberley, where they were all squatters. At least they were going buying shopping at grocery stores. No, those weren't it because we didn't have a. Glendale was on the corner, 3021. It wasn't quite on the corner. It was second to the corner because the Hells Angels lived next door, and it was.
Could be on this side, maybe.
It was nice. It was a nice street, but it was a lot of crazy people living in it. Anyway, I drove the fifth wheel out, and I was in a trailer, and I said to the lady, and this was December 23rd, 1980. And I said to the lady that ran the trailer court, the manager, I said, can I stay here? And she said, well, you can stay tonight, but tomorrow is Christmas Eve, and we're all booked up. And I said, they said that to another nice Jewish lady. And you know what she did. Yeah. So the next day I had to find a place to stay. And I'm driving this truck, which drank oil even faster than gasoline. I got no mileage. I got something like 3 miles to the gallon. And I'm looking for a gas station on El Camino Real, and I couldn't find one, so I pulled into a QFI grocery store because it was big enough for the rig. And this woman came toward me, and at that point, when you're that desperate, you talk to anyone. And I said to her, I can't find a gas station, and I need a place to live. And she said, you can stay with me.
Just like that, just a stranger you met.
Always strangers have helped me, always. You know the line in Tennessee Williams and a Streetcar Named Desire, which says, I've lived in the kindness of strangers. Of course, she was fucking them. I wasn't. Strangers have helped me always. She said, you can plug in outside our house. I don't remember her address. But she said, we're having a Christmas Eve dinner. Would you like to come? And remember, I have trouble with food. So I said, well, but I'm salt-free because of the edema. She said, don't worry. I'll make you something that's salt-free. I pulled up to her house. The trailer filled the whole fucking row. It was one of these streets. As a matter of fact, I think it was that street.
This one?
Yes. She lived there. And I parked outside her house, plugged into her water and her electricity, and I came in. She was about 50, and I came in, and they made Cornish hens, and my Cornish hen had no salt, so it had a little ribbon tied around the leg. And I met her daughter, who was a nymphomaniac, was having her 5th baby from the 10th guy or something like that. And then I met her new boyfriend, who was Dean, who was about 24, and his birthday was in October, and we bonded. And he was, you would call him, in America we called him genderqueer. He fucked anything. And he was her new boyfriend. And we really bonded. And then she said, I run a dating service. In those days, they didn't have internet dating. You'd send in an ad, And I've always named the magazine something like Playboy, but it wasn't. It was a magazine that had an ad, and it said women for $50. And I didn't know this. And she said, we need a telephone operator. This is the woman with three masters.
So many crazy jobs.
Yeah, but this is 3. And she said, yeah, you can bring your dogs.
Yeah.
So she was paying me minimum wage, but I didn't care. That was enough.
So it's adverts in magazines for people to meet.
Yeah, but it was a whorehouse.
Yeah.
It was exactly like Tinder.
Yeah. Okay.
Because the women,
like a hookup.
you had a money back hookup. Yeah. You had money back guarantee. I have no idea what this money back guarantee means. And
so
I went at
calls
this.
Were you getting there then?
Oh, and I was pardon.
What were the calls? So someone rings up and
yeah. Oh, they were nuts. No, but I mean, I really went at this. I was going to do this right. I was one of the first ones. Now they're doing it. I thought of having parties to have them all meet each people, because you get like hundreds of women that are 50 to 70, hundreds. And then you get these guys that all want younger guys. And I remember this one kid.
Was it like a swingers thing?
Oh, there was definitely, but I didn't know it. And
but you organised the parties.
Yeah, but nobody came. Nobody came. They only wanted to do the dating. And I remember this one guy. I'll never forget this one guy. He said, I love women. And I'm thinking, because I'm having such a time with my 50s to 70s, all older women, all overweight. And I said, I've got lots of women for you. He said, I don't care, fat or thin, young or old, wet or dry, I'll take them all. Yeah. I said, that's great. I said, I've got loads for you. I've got loads. And he said, yeah. He said, but there's one catch. And I thought, oh, shit, here we go again. So I said, what's the catch? He said, well, I live in a nudist colony. So I said, so what? He said, yeah, but you can't get through the gate unless you take your clothes off. And I said, I don't know. No, listen, I said, I don't know if I can find anyone. My women were pretty desperate. I said, I don't know, but I'll see what I can do. And I would get things like this. I couldn't. My stretch marks. I couldn't. So I said,
why was it your job to find the women?
Don't ask. That was what I had to do. The men called. I had to find them.
So
the men called me. Then I went to this card file.
So as single guys.
They weren't single.
Wanted
the guys, horny guys.
Horny guys looking for girls.
Looking for girls.
And you have to find...
And I have to hook them up.
It's a very primitive sort of... But it's not for dating, it's just...
No, but I'm thinking it's for marriage. I'm thinking it's for marriage. Right, so I'm thinking it's happily ever after.
In respect, this is a very, very early...
I'm dedicated. I'm dedicated to this. I'm dedicated to this. Well, anyway, so I finally said to him, listen, I can't find you anyone, but I have an idea. Why don't you take him to a bowling alley first? Figuring that no nudist is going to take his pants off with bowling. The vision of with his stuff hanging out, he wouldn't do it. So I figured he'll at least keep his pants on. She'll be able to keep her clothes on. Then we'll see what.
I like your logic there.
Yeah, so I did. It worked, and they got their $50. But anyhow, I had this one woman called me up, and she said, and we had to ask their measurements because obviously we were hooking them up, but I didn't know that. I said, what are your measurements? She said, well, it's 54. I said, 54 what? They're talking inches. I said, 54 what? She said, well, 54 hips. And remember, I'm 20. I'm anorexic. I weigh, I look like this microphone. So I said, except white. I said, what about your bosom? I didn't say words. I said, bosom. She said, in proportion. I said, oh my God. She said, but some men really like... She didn't say fat. Well-proportioned women. So I said, well, yeah, I bet they do. Here I'm trying to make myself thinner and thinner. I'm still trying to find a partner. And she said, but I'm going to show you. And she came over to my house, and I had these 2 cats and these 3 dogs. And she was braless, which means that they were hanging. They were the biggest boobs I've ever seen in my life. They were knocking against her knees, and she's braless. She walks into my house, and my house is so small that all I had was a settee. I didn't have a couch. And she sits down, and one sort of flops to the left, and one flops to the right. And my 2 cats jumped up on top of her. Cushions! And they sat there, and I'm telling you, they smiled. And she said not a word. She said not a word. Yeah, but I could never fix her up. I could never. And then I had this one guy that called me up. They had, without doubt, the sexiest voice. I thought, God, I wish he would ask me out. Had the sexiest voice. He said, my name is Jose. And no matter how many times I fixed him up, I could never get him a second date. So one day he said to me, yes, I'm going to come over to meet you. And I'm thinking, I told the dogs, now be good, because the dogs are with me at this, wherever I went. So he walks, I walk and someone says to me, someone's here to see you, Lynn Ruth. And this is in a conservative office of a real estate agent, a lawyer, and that's Marvin, who traded my fifth wheel for this house. I wasn't paying any rent. That's what happened. And me, this whorehouse thing I'm doing here. So they said, somebody's here to see you. And I walk out and I see, he was no higher than, I see the sombrero and a pair of feet. I've never met a man that was that was grown and not a midget, that was that much shorter than I am.
But with a very deep
And
voice.
under the sombrero I hear, hello, I'm Jose. And I remember saying, I'll bet you are. Yeah. But then my favorite story is the story of the sailor that called up and he said, I just want a girl. I said, well, we have about 500 women. He said, I'll take them all. I said, what do you do? I thought, what do you do? He said, I'm a sailor. I said, of course you are.
Yeah.
Yes. And I said, so then we did the profiles. Don't worry, I'll find you someone. And I'm thinking, who am I going to find? Anyway, and I said to him, so is there anything that you object to in a woman? And you have to realize who I am. If they ever said anything about color or race, they got a 2-hour lecture on diversity from me. Usually they hung up in the middle. So how can you be like that?
Did you get that a lot? People saying,
yeah. And I'm just, you're a human being. They're a human being. I gave them the whole Stanford shtick. No, we are all people in this world. Help the underprivileged. Yes. What makes you think? And, usually they hung up in the middle and I lost the customer. But this time I said to him, is there anything that doesn't turn you on? And he said, yeah, I'm not into S&M. So we're in the county that Redwood City in is San Mateo. Santa Clara is the next one. I think that's where Stanford is. And Santa Rosa is the one above San Francisco. So I said, well, that's perfectly all right. If you're not into S&M, we'll find you someone in Santa Clara or Santa Rosa. And he said, that's not what I mean. So I put my hand...
Did he describe it to you?
No, he didn't. I put my hand over the phone and I yelled out to Marvin. Remember, Marvin's the guy that owns it. I said, Marvin, what the hell is S&M? And the silence and then all the ladies in the real estate office left. And the place was empty. And he didn't tell me, but I called my father. I said, I was talking to my father. I said, listen, I can't do this job right. I'm just messing it up. I said, this guy called me, wanted S&M. What's S&M? My father, who was at that time 77, said, well, what it is. I said, oh, my God. He's not into S&M. That story's with the dating.
That's a brilliant story. All right, so we're almost...
so then I was evicted from 3021 Glendale.
You're evicted?
Because his brother was coming from Mexico. And he hired a man to beat me up. I was a victim of attempted rape.
For real?
Yes. And they took me to the hospital. And this is something that would never, ever happen. Remember my addiction with food. I'm in the middle of cooking dinner. And I'm making my favorite dinner. I'm living between the whorehouse and the... And the guys used to come use my back porch to get to the whorehouse. I'm in the middle of cooking my favorite dinner. It's 1 a.m. because that's when I eat at that time. And I hear footsteps on my porch. I think, this is the last time this is going to happen. Open up the door. And I said, that's enough. And this gigantic man walks in and starts beating the crap out of me. My dogs, who are supposed to go woof, woof, my dogs, we have no television. My dogs are fascinated. Like this. They're watching. The guy takes me from the kitchen, grabs me by my collar, and he throws me against the wall and smacks me. And I could not make one sound, not one sound. And he hit me so hard that my flesh split, and I had big splits down and the blood is all over. And he's taking me into the bedroom. By this time, I know because I've been in this dating service, I know what nasty men do. And I'm thinking to myself, for 50 years I've hung on to this vagina. It's been mine. And now, after all this, it's going to happen. And he takes me into the bedroom, and he's throwing me against the wall. He turns to look at the bed. He's going to put me on the bed. And the 3 dogs are standing there. This is like the Late Late Show. They're fascinated. One is a Cocker Spaniel.
They weren't barking though.
No, not a word. Do you remember do you know what a Cocker Spaniel looks like? It's got that droopy.
Yeah.
And they're going. and they're all sitting on the bed.
God.
And he takes me, throws me against the wall and says, "The hell with it," and walks out through my chained locked door.
What, because the dog's playing off?
He couldn't get on the bed. The dogs are sitting there. He thinks they're going to bark. They wouldn't have. They just snuggled up. They would have been thrilled. Oh, boy.
Oh, my God, that's amazing.
Nice way. Yeah. So the first thing I did, because this is me, first thing I did is I knew that you can't wash blood with a warm rag. So I got a cold rag, washed all the blood, and then I remembered the turkey in the oven. Holding this, I'm bleeding. I've got a split.
He hit your head. Yeah.
He never hit my head. It was the impact of throwing me against the wall. I had splits all the way down here.
Oh my God,
they did stitches.
Horrific.
I turned off the oven. I wasn't going to ruin that turkey dinner. Can you believe this? And holding the thing, after I cleaned up all, I wasn't going to let anybody come in where they saw blood. Cleaned it all up. I've got me like this. And I'm bleeding from all over the place. And I called 911. That's what we call 911. This would never happen today. Never. Because since I moved there, America's become a police state. And no policeman would have done this. The two policemen come in and they say, "So what happened?" And I told them what happened. They said, "Well, you have to go to the hospital." I said, "I don't want to go to the hospital. I'm eating dinner." Yeah. He said, "You don't go to the hospital."
Do you think you were in shock? Were you just trying?
Oh, yeah, I was definitely in shock. I don't think I could have done it. Because I had no pain. I had no pain. I said, "How am I going to get there?" They said, "We'll drive you." They drove me to the hospital. I said, "How will I get home?" They said, "We'll come and pick you up." I went in there, and I remember lying on this stretcher, and they're looking at me, and they're thinking, "Jesus, she's really a mess." And they took me in. This guy he stitched up my legs, and he stitched up without any anesthetic. I never felt a thing. And the whole time I was telling him jokes. So I must have been a comedian even then. I was telling him jokes. And as usual with me, they all kissed me goodbye, told me to come back. I had to go to a chiropractor. His name was Dr. Katz for quite a long time because he had thrown my spine out. And I got a very special heating pad, and California pays victimless crime people, so I got money. And the next day, I went to bed. I came home. The policeman brought me home. The dogs were waiting, like this. Where the fuck were you? Dogs were. You know what I did, don't you? I took out the turkey. I finished dinner, and I went to bed. And I slept for 36 hours. And my mother called me. That's why I woke up. I don't know how the hell she knew it. She said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Well, nothing much. I just was beaten up." And I went into the bathroom to go to the bathroom. I looked in the mirror, and I had 2 black eyes, and I had these stitches. I was absolutely horrified. And while I was in there, the dog started barking. And I thought, he's out there. And I had my hand on the doorknob. I was terrified. And then I thought, just a minute. This guy's taken 36 hours out of your life. You're not giving him any more. And I opened the door. And they were barking at something like a thing. And after that, the police in Redwood City kept a watch on me. They said, because I walked late at night. They said, "You can't walk the dogs late at night." I said, "That's when I walk them." I walked them. And I used to walk by a bowling alley that was written up in the Palo Alto paper as the big pickup station. So I called up the guy who's the police, and I said, "I walk by there every day. No one's come on to me." And I'm there with the 2 dogs and the cat. Anyway, so one day I saw this woman, because she had a really short skirt, and it was winter, and she was stopping all the cars. No idea. So I came home. By this time, the police knew who I was. I would call up, they could say, "Miss Miller." I said, "There's a little girl out there. She's lost." He said, "Miss Miller." He said, "She's a hooker." And I said, she's not lost.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. They took care of me. They watched over me all the time. I loved it there. Then I was evicted. And in order to get a flat, I had the 4 animals. And in order to get a flat, you had to pay a deposit for every animal. And I was living on $300 a month, plus my father sent me, I think, $150. And I never went to a movie. Because I had no money. And the Sisters of the Sacred Heart were just beginning to wear clothes instead of habits. And every 6 months they would drop a bag off of clothes for me to go through. That's how I replenished my wardrobe. And then I ushered at the opera. And one time Willie Nelson came to the opera, and nobody who ushered at the opera wanted to usher for it. And I got all my friends from Redwood City to come usher for Willie Nelson. When I was evicted, I had to find a house. I couldn't afford a flat. So at the same time, Daddy had opened up a Merrill Lynch account for me. And at that time, interest was compound interest daily. And I am so stupid. Oh, that's my house. I'm so stupid. I can't read statements. I can't figure them out. But Merrill Lynch cleaned up their statement thing, and it turned out that by saving, and I can't tell you how little money I would send to them. I would take a 50-cent piece and paste it on a cardboard and send it to Merrill Lynch. And this was earning compound interest. And I had earned, at the time I was evicted, $40,000, which was enough for a down payment on a house. But because I had no job, I couldn't get a house unless I got somebody to co-sign for me, because my salary was I didn't have a salary. I had the pension, which was $325. I believe it was higher by that time because of what comes later. But I always remember $325, but I think that might have been the first one, and it kept increasing. But anyway, so I looked around for a house, and I found a thing called share investing, where the yuppies didn't have a down payment, but they wanted to, and they would pay the mortgage. But I was the opposite. I wanted a house, and I had a down payment. I needed someone to pay the payments. And we found one, and it was right behind Stanford University, and my life would have been very different. And I had to get someone to co-sign for me, and it was my father. And I believe that this is the thing my mother did for me. I believe it's what my mother did. But I could be wrong. It could be my father. Because my father believed everybody should have a house. So when my father heard that I was buying a house, it never occurred to me before. He said, I've always wanted a house, which is in California, which is ridiculous because my mother was dying of cancer and he was going bankrupt because he was keeping her at home. I didn't know that. My mother had cancer for 6 years, his baby, and he kept her at home with round-the-clock care. So he said to me, I've always wanted a house in California. I'll buy the house with you. And I don't want you living in a one-room house, which was like Glendale. I was used to. So I said, okay. So I was thrilled. So we went around looking for the house. And what I didn't know was my mother was dying. So every time we found a house that was within his price range, the price range went down. And then we found a house, not here, in Lindemar, which was a real typical track house. It's a piece of shit. But it was the right price. But at that time, they had passed a law that said you can't deny a mortgage on the basis of age. My father was 77. He wanted a 30-year mortgage. And they didn't want to give it to him. So they hemmed and they hawed and they hemmed and they hawed, and the seller pulled out. The next day, the real estate agent, who was an usher also at the opera, got a letter that said the loan is approved. The loan was approved. We were offering $93,000 for a $120,000 house. Woman that's the real estate agent is sitting here with a loan. She's got the money, no house. And this woman, she had a yarn shop. This woman came in to buy some yarn. She was knitting. She said, well, we finally decided to sell the house. So Julia said, have you listed it yet? She said, no. She said, how much do you want for it? She said, we want $97,000. That was our loan. Julia said, don't do a thing. She picked up the phone and she called me. And I came to this house, and this house had everything in it I wanted. Is there any way you can get to the back?
This one?
Mm-hmm.
Let's have a look. I'll be able to zoom out.
It had glass doors that you open, had a huge backyard, and I built a deck.
Is that the back?
No.
Something.
No, that might be Diane's. It might be further down.
Oh, is it? Oh, hang on, I need to spin round.
The back
that
of my
should be the back.
The back of my house. Yeah, I don't know whether you can see it.
Yeah, it'd have to be sort of over there.
It's got a deck. It's got a gorgeous deck. That's not my house. Let's go back to my house.
It's good. I have to go around the front.
And it was just And when I moved into that house, I was no longer afraid. Nobody could evict me. It's my house. I could have as many pets as I wanted.
So this was real security here, right?
First time. I was 48. I was 48 when I moved there. I was 52. Because I stayed in that Glendale house without paying rent. I was evicted. The sheriff came and said he was going to get me for 3 years. I do a lot where I don't pay rent. I paid rent there, but this time when they foreclosed. Anyway, that was my house.
And what happened? Why did you have to move out of there?
Because at the bubble, I had taken a loan out because I didn't have enough money to live. And I had taken a loan out, and I was living on the interest of that loan. I never went into the 40,000. I got 40,000, 400,000 out of the house. At the time, I had equity was 800 and something, but then the bubble happened, and the equity went down below what I owed. Wells Fargo, whom I would like to destroy, tripled my mortgage, and at that time I was making something like 900 on the pension. I was writing freelance for magazines, and I was earning a little bit of money. I also teach. I taught night school. I taught adult education and children. I never stopped working. And I had 2 television shows, but I wasn't paid for them. But I loved them. One was called What's Hot Between the Covers. It was a book review program. And people say, so, what's hot between the sheets? I said, no, it was book reviews. And Paint with Lynn, where I had little children painting, which was a disaster. And they're still running, those shows. I did it for, I figured out that something like 10, 15 years. I did it from the time my book was published. I know I had a book published by that time. So I did it for about 10 or 15 years. And the engineer that I told you about that I said loved me, always put the pillow. So when I interviewed people, I didn't look like I was sitting in a ditch. I was very happy there. And then they tripled my mortgage. And I couldn't pay it. And I wrote them, and there was a law at that time that you can get help with your mortgage if it's over a third of your income. And this thing was about 5 times my income. It was $3,000. And I wrote them, and they wrote me back a letter that I had. I'm sorry I don't have it anymore because nobody would believe it. But you manipulate numbers, and you manipulate, and they did. And they said, so when you add this, and when you subtract this, and when you add the tax, and when you subtract that, this is only a third of your income. And it's $3,000, and my income was under $1,000. And I thought, these fuckers, they can do anything with anyone. So so then I tried to get people to help me, and they said, well, the only way you can help is if you stop paying the mortgage, which I'd never done. I always paid my bills. I'm OCD, and I did. And I lived in that house for 3 years without paying the mortgage. They had a program, they had programmed a telephone call at 10 o'clock every morning. Mm-hmm. And I got that off because I said I was disabled and they couldn't do that. Mm-hmm. And then I had sheriff's notices. I had everything. And in the meantime, I was going, with my terrible income, I was going to Britain because I had begun, when I was 71, I had begun stand-up comedy.
So this is where you started here? Yeah.
I was writing for magazines and newspapers. I saw a thing called San Francisco Comedy College, and I thought, you can't teach people how to be funny. You can't. I still believe that.
But you thought you were funny, right?
I hadn't thought about it that way.
You must have known that about yourself.
I was always telling jokes, but I never thought of myself as a performer. I never thought... I did a lot of performing.
You never had an inclination to perform before that?
No, I wanted to get married and have babies. And then when I didn't get that, I wanted to write the great American novel. And I've written 11 books. Yeah. One of which I think might be the great American novel, but it hasn't been published yet. I've read some good ones, but not like that. I have a couple that I think might be the great one. Always. I always believed in myself. I think that's the difference. I was always diminished. I knew that in the world's eyes I was a failure, but I always believed that somehow I would find it. And when I did stand-up comedy, I found it. It's just like that. And what a shame that you wait until you're 70 before you find what's right for you. But what happened is I saw this ad, and I had been promoting my books. And after I promoted my books, I would tell them jokes. I never, ever sold a book at any of these promotions, but I was running out of jokes. So by that time, I could surf the net. That's the other thing that really amazes me. I've been using a computer since 1980, and people think, oh, how did you use a computer? I've had one forever. Well, anyway, So I'm surfing the net, and I see San Francisco Comedy College. I thought, this is a ripoff. And I thought to myself, I'm going to do one of those expose articles. You know, the kind where you say, I lived on £1.20 for 6 months, and you can't do it.
So you did the comedy course to
So I
expose
called
them.
him up. Well, you're all
That's
listening
hilarious.
to me. I called him up, and at that time you left a message. You didn't have mobile phones. You didn't text. You left a message. And I said, I write for 2 magazines and 2 newspapers. I would like to write a story about you, thinking I'm just going to rip you from limb to limb. And he called back, and his name was Curtis Matthews. And he called back, and he said, I just love small Jewish women. Hadn't seen me. And I said, you have arrived. And I remember, I have to give Curtis credit. I walked in, and I made some outlandish remark that I was trying to do. And he said, I can't teach you anything. And he didn't. But I learned how to use a microphone. He did teach me. I learned what a joke is, which is surprise.
Of course, it's just an environment to do it in, isn't it?
It is.
They're not going to teach you.
But they're rip-offs. I mean, some of these, I don't want to name names here because people know, but I've heard of 2 of them. There's one in Brighton, and there's several here that are just useless. Why they charge these people that much money, they should be ashamed of themselves. I've always wanted to do a really cheap course, but everybody always says, nobody will pay it because they won't think it's any good. But I want to charge £30. I want to have 3 meetings, and I want the first one to talk about what comedy is and how to use a mic. The second one where they've written material. The third one where they present the material. Then I want a show, and we're going to do a show, and that's what the £30 is going to pay for, a place and everything. They're going to invite their friends. They're going to do the show, and then I want to say to them, okay, go out and do as many gigs as you can, and next year or whenever, we'll do it again. £30, that's all I want to charge them. And I will not be ripping them off. I can't stand it. And anybody that's listening and giving a course, you're ripping them off. I can't stand it. And I don't like people to take advantage of people.
Just like funny, I don't isn't like it? Someone said to me the other day he'd been doing comedy for like a month or something.
And he's doing all these open mics where these people are charging for people to get in, and they're not paying this kid anything, and he's giving them the entertainment. What kind of crap is that? No. You should all be ashamed of yourselves.
These people, after a while, they realise, like, oh, comedy's quite hard. It's easier to make money off comedians than audience.
That's right.
And that's basically the calculation.
Do you do comedy as well? Is that how you found us? Yeah. I this one guy, and it was from Funny Fecklers. He called me up and he said, and he wrote me and he said, yeah, we've got places for you. I said, great. I said, is it, this is Lynn Ruth, is it compensated? Because I'll take anything. If you give me £5 on a drink, I'll think, okay, that's okay. But at least it's respecting my talent. It's respecting my talent. And the fact that I have to get there, but I have a freedom pass, so I don't have to pay anything. So he said, no, it isn't. I said, well, then, this is so typically me. What I have to learn to do is just keep my mouth shut. I said, well, if I get a paying gig, otherwise I'll be there. I said, but I just want you to know that I think it's morally corrupt. I think it's morally corrupt of you to make money on these children and not give children and not pay them. He said, well, if you feel that way, then we don't want you. I said, fine. And I do. I believe it's morally corrupt, and I don't want to name all the names. And then I get this. I've been doing it for 12 years now. I've won prizes, and they'll say, well, we have to see you first. Hot Water Comedy is doing that. Well, we have to see you first. We don't know if you're funny. Well, for 12 years...
They really make you jump through the hoops, man.
Yeah, they do. And they're wrong. And it's the burlesque community is the most beautiful community. Anybody want to take off their clothes, you can earn money. You don't have to take off that many. I certainly don't. I catch cold easily. I would not do that. But they are wonderful. They pay you no matter what. They're good and kind to you. They're not competitive. You go to these open mics, and of course, open mics, all the audience is other comics. And they're all sitting there saying, that's not funny, or I think I'm going to use that joke. No, you go to the burlesque, they love you. That's just no matter what you do, that's all right. You forgot your lines, we don't care. You've got beautiful knees. The rest is not so good, but knees, great, capitalized. We love you. Here's money. Always with the burlesque community. I love the burlesque community. So someone here who's charging for comedy and not charging they're saying, why the fuck don't you do burlesque? Well, I do. And I do cabaret. I love my comedy, though. I love it. And the most interesting thing happened, and I really want to tell this to comedians. Comedians, listen up. I did a 1-hour show. I did it in Melbourne. I worked on it very hard, and when I got it, I tried it out in Brighton. In Brighton, they laugh at anything, so I wasn't worried about that. Yeah, I got a standing ovation in Brighton. They loved it. But there's a woman that is like my mentor. She's been wonderful to me, and she said, I don't want to say her name because I don't want to hurt her feelings, but she said it needs work. And I thought, well, it's really getting an awfully nice reaction. So I took it to Melbourne and I tried to work on it, but I couldn't think of anything to improve it. And I got the best write-ups I've ever gotten. But I'm deaf, so it could be the people were just going, ha, ha, ha. But I wasn't hearing much laughter. And I'm thinking, maybe she's right. Maybe I should do something with it. And I'm getting these beautiful write-ups like I've never gotten before. So I came back and I did it. I decided to do it for the Edinburgh Festival. And I went to the Edinburgh Festival, and bless his heart, Daryl Martin gave me a really good deal on Just the Tonic. But I'm not a good promoter. I'm terrible at promoting. I mean, I'm really shit at promoting. And we tried, but I don't flyer because I get discouraged. And besides, I had 3 shows. And I hired flyers for my other show, which didn't do any good. But for this show, I didn't. I just told people about it. At the Caves, I got audience because they work hard at giving you audience. But when I moved to the little Kirk, I got no one. And I'm doing this show for 4 people, 2 of which can't speak English. And they're loving it, but no reviews, no nothing. And I thought, I just don't have the stuff in me to do this anymore. And I was doing my I Love Men, which is an exquisite show, I like to think. And the audiences would be, the biggest I'd get was 20. And I just thought, I can't do this. I just don't have it in my heart to give everything I've got and get nothing. So I didn't do the Edinburgh Festival this year. But in any case, I took this same comedy show that I was very uncertain about, and I took it to the OSO Center. And I got a standing ovation and screams, and I know it's a good show. So I'm telling all you comedians out there, if you believe, John Fleming said it to me. I said, maybe I should fix it. He said, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. So I've got myself one good comedy show. And I want to do another. And I'm going to be doing, I think, at the Museum of Comedy, November 11th, 12th, and 13th. November 10th, 11th, and 12th. I'm going to be doing it. But you have to have faith in yourself and faith that your audience will find you. And at the OSO Center, they found me. And with I Love Men is beautiful. I did it in Leicester Square, and they loved it. And I did it just in Brighton, and I got standing ovations. And it's not a Brighton kind of show. Brighton is let's fuck them all. And this is not what that show is.
I like how I Love Men is not a Brighton kind of show.
It was not a Brighton show, but I got a standing ovation there too. What I love, though, is the guy that was doing the tech. He'd seen it 4 times. And at the end of the last one, he just stood up and cheered.
Really?
Yeah. And all of this is about loving yourself first. And is this Edinburgh?
This is Edinburgh, yeah.
I lived on the Dalry Road. I lived at Linton Court. And I used to walk, when I first came there, before I did performing, I used to be a punter and then a reviewer for 3 weeks.
Oh, really?
And I used to wear feathers in my hair. And I would walk down the street with the feathers flying in my hair. And all the little kids used to run after me. Yeah. There's a bar named Mario's. I used to go in there. This is the Dalry Road. And it ends on the Gorgie Road. And I stayed there for 3 years. But now I live... Well, I'm going to be in the Dalry Road again, but I've rented a variety of places. But Edinburgh is like my second home. I started going there in 1988, as soon as I had money.
So you've been going there a long time now.
Yes, but I've only been performing since 2005.
Yeah.
And Sea Venues and Hartley Kemp have been absolutely wonderful to me. They've been wonderful to me. Absolutely wonderful. I don't want anyone to think that, there's the clock. They have been absolutely divine to me, but I am a crappy promoter and I don't do well, and they have given me every opportunity, but I don't do well. And even there, when I won...
You don't do well in getting the numbers in? Because
I don't get numbers.
Some great shows.
Oh, yeah, I have.
Yeah.
I know it now. And my cabaret won Best Cabaret of the Edinburgh Festival in 2013, and I still never filled the house. Then I came home and I was all ready to come back. It might have been 2012. And I all ready to come back the next year, and I broke my foot, in July. And I remember Neil, I think his last name is McKenna, who was in the PR department. He said, "Oh, I hear you're not coming to the Edinburgh Festival. We'll have to cancel it."
Yeah.
They didn't. And I came back the next year. And then I did Granny's Gone Wild. So it might have been 2012 that I won.
What happens in Granny's Gone Wild?
Granny's Gone Wild, I throw a lot of incontinence pads at people.
Do you?
But so that was when I won. So I won in 2014. But it was the year before that I broke my heel. I was coming back to write it, and I didn't. And then I went back to Brighton, and a guy named Bill Smith put in money for production. I've never had that before. I've always done it all by myself. I've always done everything all by myself. But you have to have a basic faith that what you're doing is valuable. That's what I've always had. I remember when I took the writing in Stanford, I thought, well, but I can write. And then when they wrote the recommendations, my professor, who was Dr. Rivers, wrote and said, when she first came in here, I thought she can't put a sentence together, but now she can write. He had one of the first kidney transplants in the country, Dr. Rivers, his sister. And then when I loved Stanford so much, I wanted to get a PhD there. And I called him up and said, I would really like to get a PhD. He said, you're not the type, Lynn Ruth. You're just not the type.
Not the type. So how did you feel then, when going back to stand-up, how did you feel when you discovered that? Did you feel like it was...
Oh, my God.
You're probably just so pleased you found it, right?
I found it. I just found it. I got up. I've had 2 gigs where I bombed. I don't think there's another comedian in the world that can do that. 2. The one was with a bunch of Stanford graduate students, all men, and I was doing my strip and getting tangled in the microphone cord, and they were literally not paying attention. You know, I felt like saying, I'm taking my clothes off here. And then the other one was in Essex at a place called Bellaricki.
Everyone bombs in Essex.
It was a golf club where not one single guy... And I thought, I'll tell some golf jokes to get them warmed up. Nobody there played golf. I said, why are you here? Good TV, sports. And then this one woman came up after. I'm telling you, they were sleeping. One woman came after. Always women love me because they think, I've been going through menopause. Look, she's still there, you know. And so this woman came up to me and she said, you were so inspiring. I said, then why didn't you wake up the other people at your table? You know when you bomb. I know when I'm just mediocre, and I have been just mediocre, but I never bomb. I never do. And the interesting thing is, Don has had me at the Comedy Store for those 10-minute spots, and he said to me, all you talk about is being old. And I said, well, that's because I am. And then Tiff Stevenson, God bless Tiff Stevenson, came up to him and said, why don't you give her a 20-minute set? And he said, because all she talks about is being old. She said, you don't have anybody giving you that picture of what life is.
Yeah.
Because I do
definitely a unique angle.
I'm not afraid of my age. I'm thrilled with my age. It took me, I thought I'd die when I was 36. I made it. I just got through another thing. I made it. I'm all right. And it's true. I do a whole set that I won't do at the Comedy Store, Don. I won't do it. How does it feel to be 83? You know, for me, it's great. The line is, this has been the greatest year of my life, which it is. And then, of course, the punchline is, I can't remember any of the others, but I can. We're proving it, aren't we? I can remember all the others.
Everything.
I remember them.
But you think
I want to say something else that's really important. Everybody always says, London, so unfriendly. No.
Let's look at London, because that's where you're living now, right?
I'm living on the East Bank. In a Jewish community. It's a Hasidic community.
Oh, down here. In Stamford Hill.
And if you stop and think that my grandfather was a kosher butcher, it's right back to the beginning, isn't it? That's where I live. That's it.
So this is,
HX
a really
house.
Jewish area of London.
Oh, my God. That's my house.
The most.
I live in the... I don't go in that door. I go in the other one. I'm the only one that uses the steps. There it is. It's there. There's steps. You can't see it. It's the gate. You passed it. It's... Because that guy, I'm worried about that guy because his light's always around when I come home, and they've been off. I live behind, and I'm the only. I walk out at 6, and nobody. There's 66 families in the 66 flats. They're not families. There are only 2 people that are couples, And I walk out there at 6 and nobody's, I'm the only one. It's like living in that building all alone because all they do is sit and watch television and feel old. And I go out and I do everything. I've started the Lindy Hop. I love it.
So what do you do? Do I go on here?
Yeah, I go.
Do you ever go in the egg store? Is that right? Oh, no, that's not around here. That's more Stone Newton, isn't it?
Where's the egg store?
I think that's near Stone.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Do you know what I mean? That's
Stone-
the old Jewish shop.
that's kosher stuff.
Yeah.
No. My grandfather. No, I don't. I go to Morrison's. I shop at Morrison's.
Yeah.
I go to the Mascara. I'm going to the Mascara Sunday. I can't wait. It's great. And I go down Church Street, which is where you work.
Yeah.
I that's where I go. If you come to my house, there's no place in Stanford. Although I have found one place in Stamford Hill where you can have lunch. But I mean, it's not like Brighton. I love Brighton. I figure if I go back to Brighton, I've got to get a tattoo and a piercing. But then I can go back to Brighton. I love Brighton.
Was there a rule if you go there too many times, you have to?
Oh, you have to.
You have to get tattooed.
Well, I lived in Brighton for 2.5 years. That's where I lived above a fish and chip shop.
Yeah.
And when I would listen to this for now, you know how innocent I am. I lived in the fish and chip shop, and I smelled like fish and chips. So when I would walk out, all the guys would look at me and they go. So I'm telling this to a nurse at the hospital, and we're doing this pre-op thing, and she says, I hate when they do that. I said, well, I don't. I think it's sort of cute. I hate when they do that. She said, I had a friend that took him to court. I said, I never have anyone look at me and go, oh. Not in London. They don't do that. They're too polite. But it's an interesting thing. In Brighton, I never carried a package. Somebody would see me, and in London, I always... They don't.
Carried a package?
I never carried a package. I never lifted a suitcase.
Yeah. Oh, I see. I mean, people would help you. Yeah. And in London, they don't. Yeah.
No, in London they don't. They sometimes do, and when they do, they're so unbelievably sweet. I get out of the. I've had this happen twice. 7 sisters, and I've got a big suitcase, and there's no way I can get up the steps. And this guy and a young kid did the same thing. They took me up the steps, and then they waited. I went up the escalator. They waited because there's another set of steps. They did that. Young kid. And I said to the young kid, you tell your mommy what a good boy you are. He said, what about my daddy? I said, I don't know anything about daddies. I said, just tell your mommy. Yeah, but it's, I walked to Stoke Newington. I walked down the A10. And I walked to Seven Sisters. And people say, well, you shouldn't walk. You should take a bus. But that's ridiculous. I've got legs, and I can still use them. And I walk to Seven Sisters, and they're dope addicts all along you. That's a terrible thing. People are flying out of windows, and I just sort of step over them and keep walking. But
you got to get your exercise.
Yeah,
right?
You have to get your exercise somewhere.
So do you think so obviously your act's inspirational to people. Right?
Well, it's supposed to be funny. But
and
my
fun.
my cabarets are inspirational.
Yeah.
But what's happening now, there's a woman named Anne Morrow Lindbergh. People don't know her. She was the wife of Charles Lindbergh, who did the first transatlantic flight, and he was a fascist, so he wouldn't have liked me much. But she's a nice Catholic girl. She wrote beautiful books. And she wrote a diary, and she said, when you want something, you push and push at a door, and you think it'll never open. And then one day you look, and you say, oh my God, it is open. And it's been open for a long time. I look at my diary now, and I keep saying, no, I don't get enough bookings. I want more bookings. I'm funny, and I don't like when people say, well, you have to come to an open mic to show me that you're funny. I rip up a place. I always do. And I think I'm not getting enough bookings, but I look at my diary, and I'm going to be at a place called Anything Goes in Stockwell this Thursday. Friday, I'm at Ben. His last name isn't Phillips. That's his stage name. It's called the Not So Secret Cabaret, and it's far off in North Puppishtalk somewhere. I have to go change train, and I don't know where it is, but it's Not So Secret Cabaret, and that's on Friday, and then on Saturday, I'm doing something. I'm in Comedia. I'm at Comedia in Brighton. That's a lot of gigs.
Yeah.
And I just finished the most wonderful gig. It was at the Napoleon Casino, and I created the show. And I created a cabaret show, and I did it right. And he paid me. I mean, I'm so used to doing these open mics where I fight to get paid. And I remember I got a headlining job at the Funny Project, the We Are Funny Project. Now, I love him. His name is Alex Martini, and he gave me 10 pounds and a drink.
Yeah.
And I said, that's plenty. I got to walk here. I got my exercise. I got it. I didn't take the drink. I can't stand bad wine. Like good wine. I can't stand bad wine. An example of how cheap I am is I ordered a case of wine just because they were giving away 2 wine glasses. I could have bought the
deal.
fucking
You can't
wine,
say no to that.
but they were beautiful wine glasses, real thin glass. So what's 12 bottles of wine? I'll drink it.
Why the hell not?
Yeah, isn't that? Yeah, can you believe that?
All right,
Well,
I think
we've
we can
just
wrap it up, actually.
Oh, you've been
That's
wonderful. That's my
your
home.
whole life.
And when I think of it, I think I was this overprivileged. Someone said to me, "Oh, when you were young, you probably had it tough too." And I said, "No. My biggest conflict, besides avoiding my mother, my biggest conflict was, what color skirt shall I wear with my cashmere sweater?" I mean, yeah. Millionaire family, didn't know it. As I said, I didn't know it. We turned off lights. Never had my own dress until I was 14, but that was because she was punishing me for being me. But I only got to go to college because other people sent their children to college. They never would have done that for me. But I lived in this overprivileged, isolated, going to school with just 40 bright children, going to the University of Michigan, which is the Harvard of the Midwest, going to Stanford University, never being hungry, never being cold. I mean, I have advantages that are just, when I see a homeless person on the street and they're 1/4 my age and they're perfectly healthy, and I'm thinking, what the fuck's the matter with you? Why can't you earn money? Well, they didn't have a college education that taught them. I've always had a computer. It never occurred to me I couldn't afford it. I have always had clean underwear and a washing machine in my house. These people live in these terrible places where people rob them. One time I said to my friend Quavine, who is magnificent, he is a prince, and I said to him, well, I don't give them money. I don't give them money because all they're going to do is use money for drugs. And he said to me, did you ever think that the only escape they have from this shit life they've got are drugs? And I thought, no, I'm wrong. No. That's all they've got in an unsympathetic, uncaring society that does things like that Grenfell thing where they were for poor people, so we're not going to spend the money. I get so angry. It just, no, that's why I love Jeremy Corbyn. I love Jeremy Corbyn. I would have Jeremy Corbyn's baby. Jeremy. I would, because Jeremy...
He's the one guy you'd have kids
and
with.
one guy I would have kids with, and now that they've had all these cystoscopies, I'm ready for him. Yes, I would have Jeremy Corbyn's baby, because he is real. He calls his cat, cat. It's real. I bet he calls his wife, wife. And he would have given those people a place to live. Yay, Jeremy Corbyn.
So before we go,
that's
we're going to make love to Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah,
No, we're going to
love
very
Jeremy
quickly.
Corbyn.
If we could go back to
where I began,
right back to where you began. If you could go back and give the, say, 16-year-old you some advice, what would you say?
Don't stay there. Get the fuck out. Oh, God, it's so provincial. There's so much more to life.
Does it feel like you've come a long way now, looking at this now?
I think about it a lot.
You do?
Sure.
You still feel a real connection to this place?
Oh, I love this place. I'm here, in case anyone wonders, on a working visa. I'm legal. But I love this place. I love the way you say to people, are you all right? I know you don't mean it, but you say it. It's one step away from meaning it.
Here in the UK, yeah.
Are you all right? First time someone said that to me, I said, well, sit down and I'll tell you, I've got this. I got a kidney stone I haven't passed. I went, yeah, things. But no, I love that in this country you wake up with a pain and you're not terrified that it's going to take every cent that you have. When I broke my foot, I had two really good insurance companies. And I ended up spending $3,000 or $4,000 on my co-payments. That was when I couldn't pay my mortgage. They get you.
Terrific.
And I mean, with 2 good insurance policies, not bad ones. The Medicare one, which is supposed to be marvelous, and the Ohio one for the Ohio teachers, because I'm on pension. Really good. And I paid, so much money in co-payments. What do you do if you don't have that? You sit in the street with a little cup, and you think there's no hope. I think that maybe that's the secret. I never believed there was no hope. Even when my mother was being so awful, I never believed. I always knew, and I always knew that school was the answer. I'm not so sure it is. I don't believe that education teaches you a subject. And I'm actually a little elitist after teaching at the Community and Technical College. I think that we've done a terrible thing by robbing people who are mostly manual, mostly dexterous, of ways to earn a good living. You can't, not a good living. Of course, you can be a plumber. You can make a lot of money that way, but a good living. Now, they can't fix a car. You can't go to a grease monkey and have your car fixed. They have got to be able to do it on a computer.
Mm-hmm.
Building. I had a radial arm saw when I was painting. I learned how to make my own frames. And I made little cabinets, and I made birdhouses, and I made little cabinets, and trying to please the mother. I gave my mother one of the cabinets, and she said to me, "Why do the drawers in your cabinets always fall out?" And I said, "Because I majored in English."
That's brilliant.
So I was funny even then.
All right.
But
So-
from this small, frightened little girl who thought babies came from God or from your belly button, I thought that evil was punished and good also always prospered. And if you were good and kind, life would be good to you. And I would meet somebody lovely, and he would be on a white horse, and he would come and get me, and I would live happily ever after in a house in the suburbs with a barbecue in the back, and I'd have 2 children, and on Mondays I'd clean the house, and on Tuesdays I'd do the laundry, and on Wednesdays I'd go to my counselor, and on Thursdays I'd go to my psychotherapist. No, on Thursdays I have my hair done. I go to my psychiatrist on Wednesdays. On Fridays I'd cook dinner for the family. On Saturdays we'd go out to a nightclub or somewhere. We wouldn't drink. We don't drink. Jews don't drink. My family don't drink. I'd have a Shirley Temple, and on Sunday I'd complain, and I thought that would be my life. And if I would have stayed in Toledo, Ohio, it wouldn't have been my life. If you recall, I kept trying to get it, and it didn't happen. Instead, I started a TV show on CBS called The Little Playhouse, and I married a gay man and got out.
All right. I think that'd be a nice place to end it.
I guess I got out.
So zoom out into the sky. I've been Dave Green. This has been Dave Green's Street View Show. She's been Lynn Ruth Miller. Make sure you subscribe. I'll see you again next time.